One morning, Emily was pulling a cargo ship out of the big harbor. She did a careful turn around Bedford, the little bellboy who lives out where the harbor ends and the ocean begins. "Here we are," Emily called to the ship. "You're on your own now."
"Thanks, Emily," said the ship. "That was great tugging."
"Well, thank you," said Emily. Now, Blandford is another bellboy who lives further away from the big harbor. Emily did a jazzy little loop around Blandford. Then she did it backwards, just for fun.
"That was a great turn, Emily,"
dinged Blandford. Just then, they heard a croaky little horn. Sure enough, it was Digby, the cable ship. He was busy laying cable along the shore.
"Emily makes the best turns in the big harbor,"
shouted Digby.
"I get stuck just turning on me engine,"
he added to himself. You see, Digby is always getting stuck somewhere. Emily laughed, but it was nice that everyone thought she was so good at making turns. It was still early in the day. The sun felt warm and friendly on her hull, and Emily had nothing else to do. She decided to take her time getting back to the harbor. She set off again, zigging this way, zagging that. There was nothing better than whooshing through the waves with a great big smile. It was always pretty out near the far shore. Off in the distance, Emily could see a very special sight. The Pictou Peaks. Now, the Pictou Peaks are giant rocks that poke up out of the shallow water along the shore. They have the most amazing shapes worn down by the waves. Of course, Emily had seen the Pictou Peaks many times before on her way home. The peaks are a dangerous place for a boat to float, but today, well, today they look different. Today, they looked like a fun place to do fast turns. Should I? She thought. Well, the next thing she knew, Emily's engine began to pound louder, and her propeller seemed to be leading her toward the Pictou Peaks without her even doing anything. The Pictou Peaks towered all around Emily and kind of made her feel like she was floating in the middle of a great mountain range. She did a lazy little loop around one of the smaller peaks. It's not dangerous at all, she thought to herself. Emily sped up a little and did a snappy spin around a bigger peak. This time, she could almost feel the rocks against her bumpers. "This is fun," she shouted out loud. Emily began to make more turns around the Pictou Peaks. And you know, it was kind of funny, but the faster she went and the closer she got to the peaks, the smaller they seemed, and the bigger Emily felt. "Look at those," said Emily. Not that far away, she saw two peaks very close together, and it looked like there was just enough room for a tugboat to squeeze through. "I bet I could do it," she thought to herself. Emily turned towards the twin peaks. She slowed a moment to catch her breath. Then she roared her engine, spun her propeller, and off she went. "I can do it," she shouted. "I can do it." Those two peaks looked closer together than they did at first. Emily was going faster and faster and faster. Too late to stop now. "I can do it!" Only time for one last little turn to line herself up so she could squeeze through the peaks and... Suddenly, everything was very, very still. Emily tried to move, but she couldn't. She was stuck between the twin peaks. Back in the big harbor, Theodore was waiting for Emily to come home. "Bedford, have you seen Emily?" he asked.
She was here a little while ago,
Dinged the bellboy.
Isn't she back yet?
That's funny, thought Theodore. I wonder where she could be.
Things like this only happen to Digby,
groaned Emily. You see, Digby the cable ship was always getting stuck, not her. After all, she made the best turns in the whole harbor.
I bet I could get out of here by myself,
she decided. Emily began to wiggle and jiggle and rock and roll back and forth, trying to get herself unstuck from between those peaks.
I can do it, she grunted. I can do it.
But she was only getting herself stuck tighter and tighter. Now who should come floating by that very moment but Digby?
Am I stuck?
Said Digby.
I'm stuck,
replied Emily quietly.
Did I get you stuck?
Continued Digby. I got myself stuck, said Emily.
So, you're saying then,
Digby went on,
that I am not in any manner whatsoever, at all, currently stuck.
You see, Digby just couldn't believe that someone other than himself was stuck somewhere. Especially Emily.
I won't be stuck for long,
blared Emily. Emily roared her engine and tried to push herself free again, but she couldn't budge, not one bit.
Don't worry, Emily, shouted Digby. I'll get help.
Digby began blasting his croaky little horn before Emily could say a word. She certainly didn't want the whole harbor to know that she was stuck. Theodore was just about to turn back to the harbor when he heard the croaky horn.
That's Digby, he said.
He's probably stuck again. Theodore followed Digby's croaky horn all the way to the Pictou Peaks, where he saw an astonishing sight.
Digby,
said Theodore.
You're not stuck, said Digby. I know, Theodore. I can't hardly get over it myself.
Then why did you call me? Asked Theodore. Theodore slowly turned to look where Digby was looking and saw an even more astonishing sight.
Emily, what are you doing there?
Stuck, muttered Emily.
What'd you say, Emily?
Asked Theodore. I'm stuck, mumbled Emily.
You're what?
Asked Theodore.
She says she's stuck, Theodore,
hollered Digby. Well, Theodore just couldn't believe it. Emily never got stuck.
Well, what happened? He asked. Did a big wave suddenly come up and push you into those peaks?
No, said Emily.
Did a huge whale knock you off course?
Theodore went on.
Not exactly, said Emily. Did you slip on a giant sea snake?
Theodore was running out of things to think of.
I just got stuck,
said Emily quietly.
Well, don't worry, said Theodore. I'll get you out of there.
Theodore carefully looped around the peaks. It was a tight turn to make, but he nosed right up between them until he and Emily were bumper to bumper. And then he began to push. Emily sure was stuck. Theodore put more steam in his shove, poured on the power, and soon His friend came popping out between those two peaks just like a giant cork from a bottle. Free.
That was some good rescue there, Theodore,
called Digby, floating off.
See you later.
I never thought I'd be rescuing you, Emily, said Theodore. I didn't either, said Emily sadly. She felt terrible about getting stuck. Well, how did you get stuck? Asked Theodore. I was doing turns all around the Pictou Peaks, replied Emily. You were? Said Theodore. He'd never heard of anyone doing that. First, I did a little loop over here, explained Emily. Oh, that was great, said Theodore. And then, continued Emily, I did a spin around here. Wow, said Theodore. Emily, you're the best at making turns. Well, for the first time, Emily smiled. And then, she said, I tried to turn right through those two peaks. Right through them? Gasped Theodore. Emily began to head toward the two peaks again. But this time, she stopped. I won't try that again, she said. Emily, said Theodore, can you show me how to make great turns too? Sure, said Emily right away. And so the two tugs set off, zigging this way and zagging that. There was nothing better than whooshing through the waves with great big smiles. It was nighttime in the big harbor. One by one, the lights went out. The bigger tugs all said goodnight over on their side of the dock and went to sleep. Now Theodore and Hank stay on the other side of the dock because, well, they're smaller tugs. Good night, Theodore, said Hank. Good night, Hank, said Theodore. Don't let the dock bugs bite. Dock bugs? What are they, Theodore? Oh, they're just things that float under the dock at night, said Theodore with a sly little smile. Theodore was soon asleep, but Hank, well, Hank stayed up just a little longer. Dock bugs, he said to himself. I didn't know those were out there. He nuzzled closer to Theodore. It felt so good to have his friend right there beside him. And soon, he was fast asleep. The next day, the dispatcher sent Theodore to the repair dock for his regular tune-up. Hank went along to say goodbye. Do you like getting your tune-up, Theodore? Asked Hank. Oh, sure, smiled Theodore. I always feel brand new after I'm all cleaned up. Well, how long will you be gone? Continued Hank. Oh, a couple of days or so. Couple of nights, too, huh? Said Hank in a shaky voice. Sure. Well, can't you sleep in our dock? Said Hank. Of course not, said Theodore. I'll be up in the special dock. Well, we're here. See you later, Hank. See you later, Theodore, called Hank in a soft voice. Soon enough, the bright, sunshiny day turned into a dark, moonlit evening. And soon enough, it was time for the tugs to say goodnight. With Theodore gone, Hank had no one to say goodnight to. Good night, Hank said to himself. Don't let the dock bugs bite. Who's there? Said Hank. there it was again. That scary sound. Ducks, he whispered to himself. The words made his engine pound. Hank shivered a little, even though the water was warm. What's that? Oh, there was a scary shape right there. Fodak? Said Hank, nudging him. Are you asleep?
Who? What?
Mumbled Fodak.
Who's making all that noise?
Grumbled George, waking up. I'm feeling extra lonely, said Hank. Do you want to tell stories?
No,
Said Fodak.
go back to sleep, Hank.
Hollered George. Theodore? Hank had decided to visit Theodore up in the special dock.
Oh, Hank.
Yawned Theodore.
It's you.
Hi, Theodore, said Hank, trying to sound very brave and cheerful. Then he couldn't think of anything else to say.
Well, how are you?
Asked Theodore.
Oh, fine,
Said Hank. Just fine,
Well, good.
said Theodore.
Well, good night, Theodore.
Said Hank.
Good night, Hank.
Said Theodore. That was a very strange visit, he thought to himself.
Hank.
Said the dispatcher, waking up.
What's the matter, Hank?
Can you please turn on the dock light?
Asked Hank.
I just need it on.
Okay, Hank.
Said the sleepy dispatcher.
But please, try and sleep.
As soon as the dock light came on, Hank felt a little better, but not much better. It was going to be a very long night. The next morning, all the tugs headed off to work.
Hank?
It was Fodak, looking very serious.
You know you should not be afraid of the dark.
I shouldn't, said Hank.
This harbor is very safe,
Declared Fodak in a firm voice.
day or night.
Well, said Hank, things do seem less scary now.
Precisely,
Smiled Fodak.
and everything is exactly the same at night. It's all very scientific.
Except, said Hank, the night is darker,
Hank,
said Fodak, frowning a little.
tonight I will show you there is nothing to be afraid of.
Tonight? Repeated Hank quietly. Hank wished it would never be night again. But of course, as long as there's day, night will always follow. And once again, it was nighttime in the big harbor. Who's there? Whispered Hank. Fodak floated over beside Hank.
It's coming from right over there.
Said Fodak. Let's go see.
Go see?
Chittered Hank.
Why?
Oh, come on, Hank.
Hank?
Fodak called.
Yeah, yes?
Come on, Hank, said Fodak, pushing the jumpy little tugboat along.
You see, it's just the waves.
Hitting a creaky old board, said Fodak, shining his special light. Well, what about that? Shouted Hank. He could barely look at the scary shape.
Just an old pile of junk,
Announced Foduck. You see, Hank? There's nothing to be afraid of. Then how come I'm still scared? Replied Hank. Foduck had no answer for that. He just turned and went back to his place. That night, every little sound made Hank jump, and each scary shape made him jitter. I'm really, really scared now, Hank said out loud, hoping the scary things would just leave him alone. Well, all Hank's noise woke the other tugs. Hank, try counting foghorns, called Emily. 1, counted Hank. 2, 3.
Be quiet, Hank,
grumbled George. Hank felt miserable. He tried everything, it seemed, and he was more afraid than ever. Finally, Hank asked the dispatcher to turn on the dock light again. But it didn't really help much. Just then, Hank heard something moving through the water. Yes, there was something out there, and it was coming straight towards him. Oh, no, thought Hank. Oh, this is the scariest thing yet. Oh, he couldn't even look. Hi, Hank. I know that voice, said Hank. He peeked out from under his hat. Theodore, it's you. Of course it's me, replied Theodore. I just got back from the repair dock. Why is the dock light still on? Oh, said Hank sadly. I'm just afraid of the dark. Oh, I used to be afraid of the dark, said Theodore. You were? Said Hank. Well, what did you do? Hank was sure that Theodore was going to tell him to count foghorns or shine his light on things. You know, things that didn't work. Nothing, replied Theodore. I don't think I did anything. You didn't do anything? Repeated Hank. Then, are you still afraid? Theodore thought for a moment. No, he said finally. I guess not. I guess I just grew up a little. Well, just hearing that made Hank suddenly feel much, much better. Theodore, do you think I won't always be afraid of the dark, too?
Probably.
Yawned Theodore.
Good night, Hank.
Good night, Theodore, said Hank. Excuse me, Mr. Dispatcher.
Yes, Hank?
Can you please turn the dock light off? Said Hank. Sure, answered the dispatcher. Good night, Hank. Hank nuzzled closer to Theodore. It felt so good to have his friend right there beside him. Then the two tugs pulled their hats down and went fast asleep.